You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my somewhat awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Really excited about today's episode. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce a colleague of mine, Dr. Ted Coles. We're going to talk about, in Shawn's opinion, the most comprehensive guide to evaluating veterinary practice information management software. And the author of this paper is Ted. He has been certified as the peer specialist and compassion fatigue professional since 2016, when he founded Compassion Fatigue Coach. Using tools he learned to help others with compassion fatigue and burnout enabled him to return to clinical practice as relief part-time, then associate veterinarian. He was medical director at a clinic associated with a large boarding and daycare facility for a few years, and recently accepted a medical director position with CareVet at Jackson County Animal Hospital in Independence, Missouri. Ted, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really jazzed about meeting with you guys.
So many things I want to talk to you about. Compassion fatigue, that's and burnout. That's sort of been topic of discussion for me. But today we're here to talk about the software. We can link the two probably in the discussion. But let's start with, how did you approach this article, and how many softwares are there? I lost the count. Like, how many did you find for it?
Yeah, there's tons, and I don't have an exact number, but I think we probably looked at 50 or 75, and there was Excel spreadsheet that Shawn sent me that had some software that you had looked at previously, and so I started there, and then went to. There's a couple of online research, software review places. And one of them is Capterra, I think, is one of the best ones. So went there, and then I used a couple of other ones too. But the idea was, at first, I looked at the most popular ones, and then I looked at some of them that were maybe not as popular, but had really good ratings on some of the software review sites.
Excellent. So what were the criteria? I mean, the most popular, knowing veterinarians and you being one of us, I know that most popular is because we hate change. We can sit on a 30-year-old software product and call it most popular because we just don't want to move on and use something new. So what were the criteria for you to assess this, and what did you review as sort of comparables between them?
Well, I think the first thing that you've got to look at is how they're going to be deployed. So you've got really three main areas. One is they're on a server, and that's in your place. And the other is they're on a server and in the cloud. And then the third is they're just in the cloud. And so that's the biggest breakdown as far as, and then the other comparison points, I mean, it's all over the place. Most of these will have appointment scheduling, medical records, prescription processing, reminders, client database, invoicing, accounting. Some of them have inventory control and some of them don't. Some of them have accounting and some of them don't. And then there's, of course, reports based on all that data that you gather. So those are the basic things that you're looking at. And some of the newer ones will do really well with their electronic medical records, but they don't have anything for inventory, as an example. So it's really all over the place.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, Ivan, this is kind of like near and dear to our heart. It was 5 or 6 years ago when we met each other for the first time, and we gave a talk on how to pick your next practice management system. And we gave that talk all over the US. We actually went to London, England, and gave that talk over there. And I mean, I've got my opinions. I know you've got yours, but I'm a huge advocate of cloud. And I think what's happened in the last year since COVID started, a lot of people found themselves needing to go to the cloud in a week or a couple weeks because they had no way to access their practice management system outside of the clinic. And so, Tad, really interested to hear the cloud solutions that you've kind of stumbled across in this guide, and some of the ones that came to the top, and maybe why.
So I think there are a couple of them that are a little bit different in their approach. And one of them that I think Cynthia Barnes started this Shepherd app, and it has a history of really being easy to learn. And I think that's so important Because if you invest in one of these systems and it's really hard for you to learn up front, then every time you hire a new employee, they're going to have that same learning curve. So I thought that was one of them, that it's not the most popular, and it's pretty new, but it did stand head and shoulders above the rest as far as ease of use. And then another one that is really interesting is Vitus Vet, which Mark Alcott started. And it really started as a way to have the medical record online, because if you are an emergency vet, or you need to get records for a patient and you don't have them, you might make a mistake, and that's what started. That was the vision or the thing that happened with him that made him go start the software. So those were a couple of them that are on the online format that were different than the rest.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I mean, there's so many. That's really why we decided it would be a great idea to put together this guide. And it's been such a thrill to work with you on this journey of like writing this massive paper. That the paper is how long? I think it in total.
Well, I mean, it's 19 pages, and the last third of it is the summary, which I think really brings things together for the reader, as far as, guiding you on what's going to work for you, because there really isn't one software that's going to work best for everybody. Some of the places that don't really have good access, good connection for the server, the cloud-based server. And if that connection is going to drop, it's going to just drive you crazy. And then also what you mentioned about people being stuck in their ways, some people, they just need to have that server in their office where they can see it and feel it and know it's there. So that gets in the way of the cloud-based thing too. But anybody that's really ready to move, I think you're exactly right, Shawn. Anybody that's really looking at the very best software that's available, it's all cloud-based.
Yeah, and to me, this conversation sort of feels like, I think it's outdated. It's like, it's move on from the rotary phone. There's nobody uses that anymore. Like it shouldn't be even a conversation. Is it cloud, not cloud? People don't even use those words anymore. It's only, I think, our domain that is still struggling to switch, and there's still those discussions. But I want to look a little further into this and say, okay, are there new modifications to the PIMS sort of environment that's been now adapted to COVID? Because there's tons of talk about telemedicine. There's probably 60 new telemedicine platforms that's been deployed out there. Any of the PIMS that actually thought about having it inside of the practice management system, or any sort of other connections to the client? Is there anything new that is innovative in the PIM space?
Well, there's a ton of stuff that's new and innovative. You guys had interviewed this guy from Pet Desk not too long ago, and all the things that he's done since the COVID started, with their program. And Televet is another one that came to the top. And I guess that Vitus Vet is one that I was thinking about, that has a lot of telemedicine capabilities. Vet Tools. I guess the thing is, these are add-ons to supplemental software. And there are a lot of them that have taken the telemedicine to heart, incorporating it within the software too. Let me think about that just a little bit more. That's a really excellent question. I don't know which one is the best that incorporates it in.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why we got you to write this guide, right? There's so much comprehensive detail about all of these that it's hard to kind of keep them straight. And so, a little bit of a broader question. What were some of the standout things when you looked at, like, was deployment a standout? I know my friend over in New Zealand, at EasyVet, they spent a ton of time with their deployment process. They were sending people to each site individually to do deployments. And I think that that's a really important element of any software that you deploy in veterinary practices. You need to make sure you train the people. You need to make sure you support the people. You need to make sure you check in with the people. And I would argue that change management is as important of a process in that software life cycle to get it out the door, to get it in people's hands, as the software itself. If you do a great job of training people, the likelihood of them using it is going to be far more. But is there anything like that, Tad, that you uncovered when you were going through this process?
So, well, I think the ones that really stood out for me were on the SaaS side, or the service available as software, are EasyVet, eVet Practice, Vetter, and Shepherd app, and they all had full service cloud-based options, good track records, and at least had some ways of doing telemedicine. And the thing about the telemedicine is, I think you're going to have to get it in your hands and work with it and see how it's working to determine if you need to add something on like televet or not. And I think that's an excellent place to go to the manufacturer of these softwares and ask them, how does your system work with when I'm calling somebody on the phone? Am I going to be tying up more phone lines, or am I going to be able to do it directly through the software? I mean, it's an excellent point.
That's great. And so the other thing that you mentioned about these additional applications that you can plug in. So Pet Desk and Taylor Kavanaugh. Yeah, he's an excellent entrepreneur and a friend of mine. So he created this based on first the reminders, but now I know they expanded their portfolio, and then it's similar to Ally DVM software that's now owned by MWI. But I know there's now PIMs that come with the application that is incorporated into the PIMS that is available to the end user, the pet owner. One of them is just entering the market. It's called Digitail. I don't know if you bumped into that one.
Yeah. I did cover Digitail, and it's interesting. I mean, it's a relative newcomer. They do have a full featured cloud-based system. And I think you interviewed somebody recently who also was starting out with providing information for, like, if I'm a customer, if I'm a client and I've got a pet and I've got a problem, I go onto their website. I don't remember her name, but you go onto her website, and then she directs you. It's over in England, I think. So that's an interesting approach to take. Digitail is one of them that's got a pretty good price point too. It is difficult to compare value from what's available on their websites and things, but it seemed to be one that has a pretty high value. They've got for their starter package, it's only $79 a month for the annual. That's one of the lowest, and $95 a month for mobile vets. So the only thing that you'd need to add to that is if you're going to do texting, then you have to pay additional fees for texting. But I mean, it's a great startup price.
Yeah, and then it does come with the feature that you don't need to buy an extra app for client communication, because everything just comes straight to the pet owner. So I think that we had Sebastian here, I think the CEO, and quite innovative guy. They're coming from Europe, and they already have, I think, over 400 deployments there or something. Yeah, so we're excited to see them enter the market.
Another big thing about that program is it integrates with Abaxis, Antech, and IDEX diagnostic labs. And that's another integration that you're going to need to look at with any of these systems. Do they already integrate with that, or do you have to do an add-on to integrate with it? And to bounce back to Shepherd app, when I reviewed them, they didn't have a way to really integrate seamlessly with it, but they have a workaround that just includes you cut and paste it and put it in the record that way. So it didn't seem like it was probably that big a deal. I haven't had my hands on it and done it myself, but those are the kinds of things to look for. Do they have a way for you to accomplish getting that diagnostic work into the pet's medical record? Because you're going to need to look at that again.
So we've covered the client connection. We covered the cloud versus server. We talked about the integration with lab. What are other main things to look for when you're picking the software? What are other features?
Well, I think Shawn talked about the training. That I think you're going to have a relationship with that company. They're going to make changes. And so onboarding those new changes and how are they going to train your staff? Are you going to be training the staff? Does the training fit with the way that you learn best too? So some of them have some pretty, it's obvious that they've got training that's available online, because I could go on, I didn't have to have their software to go on and see their training modules. And so you could look at that and see. So I think training is the biggest thing for an ongoing concern. It's like you're getting married to them.
Another question, a kind of observation that came up in our talk, Ivan, that I remember back to, you were a big advocate of whatever company you go work with, make sure they have a customer success team, make sure that they have a dedicated group of people that are there to make sure that you're successful with their software. And I know that this is, I mean, Ivan, why don't you color in the lines for me a little bit there? I mean, your career was integrating with all of these different PIMs with SmartFlow, and then you went to work for one of the biggest ones, IDEX, and ran their technology division. So, maybe help color in the lines from a customer success perspective.
Well, I think that it's important to understand what customer success is. And I'm glad that you mentioned it, because a lot of these organizations will have support. And that's another item to look for, because at IDEX, they were charging for support on Cornerstone, for example. And most softwares don't have a separate charge for support. It's just included in a subscription. So you want to make sure that that is incorporated into the cost, because otherwise you'll be looking at, 50 or $100 a month, and then additional, 300 on top of that for support. So you want to make sure that that's included and there's no small print. But support is when you have a problem. And that's when, if you're running a tech company, to me, it was always late. When someone has a problem and they're enough motivated to contact you, they're pissed off. They're not just, having a problem, because they're trying to run the business. They're trying to treat animals, and the software is the least of concern for them. So if they're calling you, that's too late. What customer success does, it's a separate division in the organization that is proactively examines the customers and does the sort of quarterly reviews and understands how customers are interacting with software. So at SmartFlow, we had a separate division that was proactively contacting. It was an account manager that it's not just sell and then goodbye and then write us a ticket when something is not working, but proactively reaching out and introducing new features, understanding the customer success rate, and doing all of those things. Because when the customers are leaving you, and that's for those that are starting, any sort of technology products, that's too late. It's way too expensive, way more expensive to try to get the customer back who churned. So what you want is to make sure you're proactively reaching out, finding out all the problems and correcting them along the way. And that's a huge difference between the customer success and support system.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. I think it all gets down to improved efficiency. That's what you're really looking for. And with your lean healthcare management, Ivan, I think that really is what this all fits. You've really gotten into that lean thing. You even got so lean you cut your name down too, right?
There you go. Yeah, nice. I never thought about that, but that is that's good. That's
doesn't have any hair left either, Ted.
Yeah, that's for aerodynamics too. But yeah, you actually, I don't know if you know this story about many, probably don't. So when we started with SmartFlow, my last name is very Russian looking. And I thought maybe people don't want to open cold emails from someone Russian, especially after the elections of the previous president in the US and all the Russian thing around it. So I tested my last name, the short, that's Zach, so Ivan Zach versus Zach Karinkov, and I sent 2,700 emails with the A/B campaign testing one and another. So 17% less opens email when it's the full Zach Karinkov. And then I decided to just keep it lean, like you said, with the Ivan Zach.
So Ted, I've got another question. I mean, what are the big learnings for you? You've gone through, you've spent months putting this work together. What have you learned, doing this? Like when you're putting the pen to paper about all of these different softwares, what are the standout things for you as you think back to doing this work?
Well, I guess there's a couple of things. People who already have a software program are so reluctant to switch. And so it puts them behind the ball. One of the practices that I've worked for is using one of the systems that ranked low. And not only that, but they're on version 3 and version 12 is available. So just as an example, there's just no way they're keeping up. So there's all these workarounds that you do to try to keep using that same, and it has to do with the owner. And then the other thing is, I think so you've got that group of people, and then you've got people who are in it new, and those people, the people that are coming in new, have so much better choices, it seems, and it's easier for them to figure out what to do. Now, the ones that already have a system, another thing that they're going to need to look at is there a way that they can transfer the records over into the new system easily or not? And so that's another thing that was covered in the paper, that each company has their own way of doing that, and some of them charge you for it and some of them don't. But I think really the essence is this software isn't going to do anything to improve your practice if it doesn't improve your efficiency. And so if you're investing a whole bunch of time and effort, however that comes out, through money, monetary or hours, I mean, some of the software, it might be less expensive, but if you're going to spend a bunch of hours trying to get it to work, then you really haven't saved yourself anything.
Well said.
Yeah, opportunity cost. One of the other things that I wanted to jump in quickly for a minute is for the people that listen to our podcast, they may be on one of the legacy systems. They've got a server in the closet. They have no interest in changing. Why should they look at the new software, in your opinion? And there's definitely a large percentage of listeners that are probably on Cornerstone or on Avamark, and they maybe haven't updated in a while. But why should they maybe even give the paper a read? What don't they know that they should know?
Well, some of this comes back to what I was just reading about in Dr. Zach's paper about the burnout survey he did and lean management. You're continually going backwards if you're not taking steps to improve, if you're not having continuous improvement. And that's one of the areas that this fits with. It's like you're going uphill on a bike, and if you aren't putting effort in, you're going to be going backwards. You're going to be losing staff because they're not going to have if as a staff member I don't have the ability to make changes, then I'm going to get tired of always fighting that same battle. So the software just fits in with the whole idea of continuous improvement.
Well said. Well said. Well, gentlemen, I hate to interrupt us, but we're way over time. So, Ted, we have these 2 questions we ask at the end of every episode. And the first one is there a TED Talk, a YouTube video, or book or paper that you recently read and got inspired that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
Well, I think this is when I read your paper and how you were inspired by a guy on the human side with the lean management. A similar thing has happened to me. A guy, Ronald Epstein, wrote a book, Attending Medicine, Mindfulness, and Humanity. And I have just dog-eared this book. It seems like it's got a lot of answers for the same issues that we have on the veterinary side. And so that has really been helpful for me. And some of the same things that you talked about are in that book. One of the deals that I found really interesting, he talks about is the collective mind. And he goes back to think about or review high reliability organizations and what happens on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier, and how the systems that come to play there are so important. And one of the things that you mentioned in your paper too is you've got to have the ability for everybody that works there to stop. And we've got an issue, and we need to have everybody pay attention to that issue. So he called it controlled anarchy, I think. So you need to be able to have that. So that's the book that I think has really opened my eyes to some things that we could maybe do better in veterinary medicine.
That's awesome. So, and then the last question: another innovator, someone that you've run across in your career that's in the vet space that you think we should invite to the show.
I would reach out to Cynthia Barnes. I was really impressed with what I saw. I don't know her at all personally, but she's the one person when I was going through all this that I thought would maybe fit well with you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.